it's amazing that I get to talk to you, first of all, for this specific.
Likewise, I'm a fan of your music, so
Most importantly, I think you're one of you've got an angle to this world that we haven't talked to anyone yet. Everybody's very individualized and unique in this program, this seminar. It's fantastic for the young people that are going to be watching this and interacting with this and learning, because everybody here for this is basically just trying to figure out their roadmap and how they can turn a love of music into a lifelong career of music, or total diversion that maybe once spawned from this love of music. And that's a really cool thing that I've found talking to people, that nobody knew, obviously, that they were going to do this when they were 20, what they're doing right now.
Right.
Some people have, some people have that conviction early, but a lot of times I'm finding by talking to people like you who have made a life out of this, that there's just such a cool story behind how you got to the major events that kind of showed you, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing, and this is the path that I'm taking. And I didn't think it was going to go that way, or I made it go that way. I think those are the nuggets that are really cool to dissect and show the kids, oh, okay, like that's how he got from idea to reality. Yes, everybody says, just make it, be yourself. Like, you just got to put one foot in front of the other and you'll get there. To be a music career. But it's not that easy.
It's not at all.
It takes little steps, and it takes chance interactions. It takes forced interactions. It takes opening your mouth when maybe you're shy, or extending a hand, reaching out for some favors or a question.
That's right.
And I'm sure you have tons of those those stories.
A lot of happy accidents, some actual accidents.
Yeah.
Many mistakes, it's all a learning journey.
I loved, let's jump into it. So I was reading, first of all, introductions, I think would be great. Who are you? What's your name?
It's a great question. Myself.
Oh, no, don't, I'm not getting deep yet.
I'm kidding.
If you could introduce yourself to everyone here, that'd be awesome.
My name is Amaechi Uzoigwe.
Awesome. And you live in Harlem, correct?
I live in Harlem, New York City.
And
Ann Arbor, grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but
where did you graduate from college?
Pioneer High School, captain of the 1984 state football Class A state champions. Thank you very much.
And then you went to a little university that we're all familiar with, correct?
A little university there, and I moved to New York the day after I graduated. That's how much I wanted to get out of it.
That's amazing. But now that you're older, you understand what a great town it is.
It's such a great town that I'm lucky enough to have one of my daughters attending there as well. She's a junior.
That's fantastic.
And it allows me to come back even more, which is a real pleasure for me. And it's just full circle. And
now you are also an adjunct instructor at NYU, correct?
At NYU,
yeah,
at the Tisch School of Arts, Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music, which has been great. And I'm also going to be co-teaching a course at Ohio University.
Oh, okay.
Next year with my friend Professor Josh Antonuccio, who runs a fantastic music program.
So you're embedded.
Well, it's in my blood. My dad was actually a professor at U of M for 15 years, so I grew up in the world of academia and college campuses and surrounded by these things. So it feels like home.
Yeah. You know the vocabulary, the language familiar to you.
Yeah. I never thought I'd find myself back in it in this way. Right. But,
I think for beginning's purpose, I would love to just hear what you think you are in terms of the music industry. I think your artist management is that at the top? Do you think you're a manager of artists or ideas?
It's a great question. Again, I ask myself that too. What the hell am I? Because it's hard to really discern that clearly. Given my everyday, I do so many different things. Part of which is artist management, and that's really what got me into the game. And it's been the backbone or the hallmark of what I've done. But that has extended into so many different areas. I also run record labels. I also, publishing companies and, apparel companies and cannabis and craft beer. And so you wear so many different hats. I think at the end of the day, what I am is someone who's pretty good at facilitating the dreams and the plans, the businesses of creative people. I'm able to work with them effectively because I also have a creative mind. I get to do a lot of the creative marketing to Run the Jewels, for example. I'm not an artist. I do not pretend to be, but, it's a big sandbox to me half the time. Like, let's all jump in and see what we can come up with. I don't care who has the best idea. There's, no ego, but like, let's go. Let's not let fear drive what we're doing. Like, let's keep that spirit of discovery and magic and the unknown and possibility alive, that, as much as possible, because I think, especially in the arts and anything that requires creativity, once you lose that, you're finished.
Totally. I feel the same way. Going back to the very beginning, though, so your first official position was with LP, right? Working with him.
Well, yeah. And I stumbled into that. I had no aspirations of being in the music business or a music manager. When I graduated from U of M in New York, I wanted to be in film.
Okay, so you went there for film.
Of it. I thought that's what I was destined to be. I was the kid who would go to the Michigan Theater, 14 days in a row, right? And to watch, I was obsessed with movies, and I was a writer. I started writing actually at U of M for a music magazine out of Seattle called Hype, right prior to the whole grunge thing taking off. One of my roommates at U of M had moved out there and started his journalistic career.
Did you by any chance see Nirvana play at the Blind Pig on their legendary?
I did.
You were there at that date?
I did. I've seen many. I mean, some of the most formative shows of my life were at that place. Fugazi. I mean, the list goes on. I saw Soundgarden there. I saw Helmet there. I saw
Helmet.
Again, I could talk about that forever.
Yeah, totally.
But so I moved. I wanted to get into. Actually, to be honest, my first trip to New York lasted about 6 months. I was having a little bit too much fun, right? I mean, it was so. I'd come here on spring break at U of M. Like, my friends would go to Club Med, or they'd go to these like exotic locations. I'd be like, I'm going to Manhattan. Bet you I had more fun than you did. And I just fell in love with the place. So I had a little too much fun, and a friend of mine from U of M, one of my good friends, she was hanging out with her and her parents, and at their place in Greenwich Village, and her mom was the absolute best, and kept it real, really real. She had a little wine and told me that I wasn't ready for New York City.
Wow,
and that I needed to go back to Ann Arbor and get my focus.
Okay.
And I'll be, and come back when I'm ready. She's like, no doubt you'll be ready. You'll be back, but you're just not ready now. You have a plan.
Wow.
And I thought that was amazing.
Yeah.
And my parents had moved back to Nigeria when I was in high school. So I sort of, since I was like 16, I was sort of on my own, right? And navigating life. So there wasn't like that person at home, so to speak. So, but Mrs. Siegel played that role for me, and she's like, meet Alex, her daughter, my friend, at her job tomorrow. She'll have a train ticket for you, and come back when you're ready. So that's what I did. I followed her orders.
Okay,
and I rode back on the same car as Jack Kevorkian, Dr. Kevorkian, which is weirdly ominous.
Yeah,
I thought maybe. So I went back, tail between my legs, and I got a job at Borders Books, the original Borders, which
there's a Knight's restaurant there now.
I know, it's heartbreaking, but it was cool. My ego. It's good for my ego, because that was one of the hardest jobs to get. You had to take like a really extensive exam on your knowledge of literature and books, et cetera, et cetera. And I was a bit of a nerd, and I was philosophy and English major, so reading was my part of my skill set. And so I got that job, and I was there for a while, and I enjoyed it. But one day, one of my best friends called me and said, hey, he was working for Amnesty International. He's like, hey, they're sending me to Jamaica and I can take anyone I want. Do you want to come? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'll pack my bags. Let's go. So we moved to Jamaica.
Okay.
And we worked in human rights work there. And that changed my life, really. It changed my brain at that point. It sort of got me focused, you know, in the sense that I knew like I was ready now to come back. And I went back to New York with no money. I had nothing, but I had focus. I had a plan.
You think that gave you some perspective that you hadn't had? Like just maybe seeing
gave me perspective. It definitely did. But you know what it really did that I think turned the light on for me more than anything? Because it wasn't that I was in a different country. I lived in Africa as a child, Europe. I grew up all over the place. So that wasn't that. Mm-hmm. It was, we got to get our hands dirty. Okay. We got to go and actually do what we're working in prisons and we're doing this, we're doing that. We're dealing with real people. It's not clinical. It's not sterile. It's not a classroom. It's nothing like that. And there was no a neatly paved path of goals and boxes you have to check in order to advance yourself, etc. Yeah. And I don't begrudge that pathway at all. That's probably the way my parents. Well, you know, the fact that I didn't go to law school or engineer or medical school as for immigrant parents it's a real heartbreak.
Yeah.
But again, the light it turned on was, man, I got to be doing stuff. I got to be in the mix, like doing stuff from a distance or not feeling like I'm in it. Mm-hmm. You know, that's what turned me on.
Where was music throughout all this for you?
I was there when Buju Banton dropped his first joints at like age 17. Wow. You know what I mean? I went to Sunsplash. Like it was amazing. I grew up, my parents were Bob Marley fans as well as other types of music, but so I always a huge music fan. But musically, you know, I mean, I had friends at U of M. A lot of my friends were in bands. Some of my roommates were in a band called Big Chief. That was from Detroit post-punk band that signed to Sub Pop and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it was always in my environment.
So music love always, as you were doing the filmmaking, as you were doing.
But that's what I thought.
Borders, as you were doing Amnesty International, like everything was always there.
It was always a soundtrack to my life. Cool. So when I moved back to New York and started getting into film.
So from Jamaica was to New York?
Yep.
Okay.
And a guy, another U of M grad who I didn't really know at U of M, but I got to know him in Manhattan. He was in the film business and he hooked me up with some gigs, you know, like some production assistant jobs. So I started finding my way in. I was living with Lucy Liu, the actress, another Michigan grad.
Okay.
And down the street from us in Tribeca in Manhattan, Robert De Niro had opened something called the Tribeca Film Forum. Mm-hmm. And I went down there to see if I could intern. And in the process of that, I discovered there was something called the Black Filmmaker Forum that he had given office space to that was run by Reggie and Warrington Hudlin, who had done a movie called House Party series, which I'm sure you remember. And they were young still at the time, but they were trying to empower this whole Black filmmaking movement. So I started interning there. From there, I got a job working at 40 Acres and a Mule, Spike Lee's company, right? So I was getting on track, and I was also working on music videos and movies and TV commercials and all types of stuff, and working my way up the ladder. Spike, they gave me my first assistant directing gig on a short film, and so I was, then I started. A couple of friends of mine from U of M moved to Manhattan, and our plan was to start our own film production company and shoot videos. That was our dream, right? We thought it was. And in that process, we started meeting. Like, we'd work on bigger stuff during the week, and on the weekends shoot our own videos, shoot, direct, I'd be directing, he'd be directing. We met artists that way. And a lot of indie, unsigned, rap, hip hop acts, punk rock, whatever. I was down to do whatever. And cheap, which helped. So so it's funny because it ended up being a model that is pretty popular in the new world. But back in that old world, we were offering to do stuff for free. were damn near, nothing. We get people to say yes that way. So for videos, we started meeting a lot of recording artists. And on one video shoot, was a rap band from Brooklyn, and underground, signed to an indie, or we thought. And, they asked me, they were like, "You sound pretty smart. Would you mind reading our record deal? Because we haven't signed it yet." And I'm like, "Me?" Like, "Okay, sure. Why not? Let's do it." So I decided to dive into that side, and I'm like, okay, I think I was a philosophy major. I can get these things, concepts. And they asked me if I'd meet with the record label, which I agreed to do. And I'm like, well, again, why not? And and I arranged to have a meeting at some diner in the West Village, walked in, looking around for record label people. I don't see anybody that looks like a record label person. I do see a young teenager in a booth, young white kid,
okay,
with that looked very hip hop. I'm like, that might be the label, right? Yeah. Turns out it was, and it was like a 18 or 19-year-old version of LP.
Okay.
Of Run the Jewels, who, fast forward, and since then we've
the meeting of a lifelong collaborator.
It really was.
Not to ruin the story, but
no. It was amazing, and from that point, and he was already in a group called Company Flow that was starting to do their thing. There were not certified underground legends now, but we started a relationship then. I'm like, this kid is 19 and is so smart. Like, how does he have it all figured out at such a young age? Like, I was blown away by him. And then I heard his music, and I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are onto something. And they were taking off on the underground at that point, and they ended up finishing. So I'm going to back up a little bit.
Of course.
Part of our thinking and why we wanted to get into management, we decided to build a recording studio. We're like, listen, if we manage artists, then we get to shoot all their videos. It's like, it was such a naive.
Okay, so you're still thinking video at that point, yeah.
Yeah. So we built a recording studio down in Wall Street, which is the cheapest place we could find space.
Yeah.
Ironically, and one of my partners, he was I think a biochem engineering major at Michigan, and we're like, well, you're the only one with an engineering degree, so you gotta. That's your department, right? So he ended up, we made it free. Anyone who wanted to record there, free. We didn't know what we were doing, so they could get mad at us if it sounded like crap. But we figured
those are moments where I want to pause that I just think are so important,
Right.
Whenever the decade is, or whenever the time frame is, there's moments, I think, in everyone's career where you have to kind of make a decision. And I talk about this in my class. Not everything is going to have a monetary return immediately. But if you're always thinking about, okay, what other types of income or personal income or personal gain will I get from this experience? Whether it's working with somebody for free, offering a service for free, or also knowing when you probably shouldn't be offering yourself out for free.
100.
But I do think that's so important to think about, as you're establishing yourself, is finding those moments that are important to just say, look, you know what, this is just worth doing, like no matter what.
That's right. And I think we've seen that really demonstrated really pretty powerfully in the world of startups. And I look back at when we started this company, it really was a prototype startup in the sense that, we were looking to, at the end of the day, create a product.
Totally.
Right. But we also needed to prove ourselves and prove that people liked our product, right? And that we could create engagement with the product. And also, to be completely honest and transparent, we had some capital. We were able to do that because we had a little bit of capital to backstop us, So we didn't have to charge people studio time right away, right? Because we could spend X amount of time getting our groove on and getting the hang of it before we flip that switch. So that access to capital is really, that's a real blessing. It wasn't my capital, right? It was one of my partners happened to have a family that had some money. So we were very fortunate that we could do enough that we were able to do enough to give ourselves a little bit of a competitive start. But I think all of that, back to the Jamaican thing briefly, and what it all did for me, how I got into this really, This is another example of something that I knew I could put my hands on and I could get right into it, right? And I didn't have to be at a remove, and I didn't have someone teaching me or telling me or managing me or instructing me or watching me or da-da-da-da-da, or I could just fucking do it, right? And learn as I went along. And that was exciting to me. I remember when we came up with the idea of our first company in New York, I couldn't sleep for 2 nights. I was so excited. I literally stayed up. I just laid in bed thinking of all the amazing shit we could do.
Wow.
And we're gonna do.
Yeah.
And I couldn't wait to get started every day. I still kind of feel like that. I'm blessed. Like I can wake up and do things I love. And I think that's the key to it, though. For me, that's the key. Yeah. I need to be doing stuff I love, that I'm engaged with, that's exciting to me, with people that turn on my brain, and I feel like I'm doing something of value. And for me, I was able to find that in the music business, right? I was able to land in a place that I didn't expect. I had no idea about it. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't really know many people in it. I didn't know how the money worked. I knew nothing. Yeah. And I think that was also kind of helpful in that sense. That was a little naive or a little bit green, because I didn't come in with preconceived notions of a whole lot of things, what 100%. They could or could not be.
100%. And the people you think you do meet, or I meet, that you could tell were maybe either raised by elders that either had the same job and were not really nepotism, but just people who kind of said, okay, well, I know this industry, so why don't you come in and work? You meet those people, and they have that model already in their head mapped out of how things should work and how they're going to work to make those things happen. And that's just the way they work. But I think when you have someone like yourself, or somebody who's very left field coming in, that's when you get the ideas that nobody expected. Yeah. Or that's when you get the things, well, I see this problem. And I see this problem, I'm going to put them together like this and figure them out.
That's right.
And then you have a totally new situation or new solution. So I'm sure that energy was very welcomed by the people you were working with. That probably saw
I think, and we all sort of figured it out. I mean, we some birds of a feather to a degree, and we sort of, and it was almost
camaraderie is huge in this industry.
It is, and we're really looking for parents, so to speak. We were looking for partners. We were looking for people we could work with.
Yeah.
Right. Not bestow things upon us, right? And record deals and have these gatekeepers, because at the end of the day, myself, my artists, the people that we align with, those of us that align together, we shared some other traits which were not really down with authority, right? Like we had issues with authority figures and authority systems, right? Dictating what we could or could not do.
Okay.
We're confident, or maybe at that age, borderline arrogant enough in our own intelligence to be like, we're smart as these people. Like if they can figure it out, we can figure it out. We can do it ourselves. And we did not have any issue with doing the work.
Yeah.
The work was part of it, right? Like the work was also part of the thrill, and being there, putting in those long hours and doing it together, and that camaraderie and that community, and like we're in this together. And if it's 14 hours in the studio, 20 hours in the studio, like we're on a mission together.
I think those are 3 very important points that you just pointed out. Not worrying about the thing that's already set up, the authority, the system, the strategy that's been laid out before you ahead of time. Not worrying about bucking the system.
Right.
Number 2, a little bit of confidence, a little bit of cockiness. Self-confidence goes a long way if it's not abused.
Absolutely.
If you know how to flex your self-conceived muscle and power at the right times, it's very important.
Right.
I think it conveys to people that you mean business, that you think you mean business, that you assume that you know what you want to do. And I think that's such a addictive personality trait to work with. I love meeting young people who are very just upfront, and it could be like, I don't know anything about this, but I want to know,
right?
Like them saying that even is inspiring, and I think that's kind of what you're talking about. You need to have
absolutely.
You need to have
a little swag, and you need to have a little swag. And I was fortunate again that I was working with. I mean, I've worked with all types of musicians, but back then I was working with a lot of rappers do not lack in that confidence, that ability.
Well, the third point was important: doing the work. I think that.
Well, the work is critical, and that's part of what drove us. I mean, LP again, who now it's 25 years deep into our relationship. We've been through everything together, and I've learned a lot from that guy. Who's younger than me, who was but again, like a lot of New York City kids, was so much more seasoned than a lot of us, right? At a younger age, and just was tapped in a different way. But he taught me a few things. One was the power of no.
Okay.
Saying no. Just saying no. If you're not feeling it, if you don't like it, if you don't like the deal, no amount of money is worth, like, if you don't, he had no problem walking away from things.
Good.
Saying no, it's not right. It's not right for him, or he doesn't fit. And the kind of money where most people at that age would grab the check and go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not him. So I've always deeply respected that about him, and I've learned that. The power of no. But also, I'll remember setting him up with his first, there was an indie label that wanted to sign his group. Like, was the first, like, indie with money and, like, some hype, and the first, like, we'll fly you out to LA meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And they fly him out, just him, right? And the reason I know all of this is because the head of the label called me up, like, just could barely put two words together. He was so, like, discombobulated by what just happened.
Okay.
And I'm like, what the fuck just happened? He's like, your client walks into my office, opens up my humidor, pulls out a cigar, lights it up, puts his feet on my desk, and says, all right, what are we talking about? Right? Today.
Oh my goodness.
And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, he did what? And I'm cracking up, and I'm like, yeah, he did. Right? Yeah. But that's sort of, and it really shook the label. The label's like, oh, we're not dealing with a kid, even though he was like 21 years old. They're like, oh, this guy, right? He's like on some other shit. And it just showed me you need to have the confidence. And he did that. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Right. He wanted to test them as well.
Yeah.
Right. And show them that he's not some kid. He's not a punk. He's gonna, hey, he's full of swag, confidence, and sometimes you need that too. And it's a little bit rock and roll. It's a little bit more of a punk rock attitude. Yeah. And you need to be able to put some fear in people. I don't mean show physically.
It's still show business. I think that's always good to remember. Sometimes is for good or worse. Absolutely. It's always good to remember that you can put some show into it, and it's okay.
I'm gonna share another anecdote, an LP anecdote. When we were later on, when we had a record label called Definitive Chucks, an indie label.
Yes, I was going to get to that next. I think that would be the next stepping stone.
So we were working on a distribution deal, and had a big meeting with the big honchos at the distribution company. A lot of money was at the table, and I had just read Richard Branson, Virgin Records, etc., Virgin Atlantic, Virgin everything, his biography, and there's a brilliant anecdote in there where he's got a meeting, some high-powered finance guys. He arranges with his secretary to interrupt the meeting and to say that Mick Jagger was on the phone. This is all a ruse, by the way. Totally true, right? And she's and Richard Branson's like, nah, tell him I'll call him later. But the finance guys are like, are you crazy? It's Mick Jagger. Of course you can take the phone call. He's like, no, you got, this is more important, right?
Yeah.
So of course that totally closes the deal.
Yeah.
So I arranged with my assistant, and Elle was working. I'm not going to say the artist's name. He was a really high profile, legendary artist. He was working on a project with. So I arranged with my assistant to interrupt our meeting and say this person is on the phone and really needs to talk to him. And he's like, nah, tell him I'll come. We just copied it, the playbook, right? Yeah. And it totally worked. So, you can't be afraid to put a little razzle dazzle in it sometimes and get your leverage, because that's what we were looking for. How do we get a little leverage in front of these big shots who think we're just a couple of underground or indie guys?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We had to flex a little bit. We didn't lie.
As a side note, I would say anybody whoever has that happen to them at this point now, I would demand to talk to that. Say, oh, I know, I know Mick Jagger.
Right.
Talk to him. Let me say hi. Tell him Matt wants to say hi. And then you put them on their back foot. They're like, right. He hung up. I'm sorry.
Flip the script. So anyway, but again, that's something we were able to do because we had agency. There was no one to tell us, hey, don't do that. That's crazy. You can get in trouble or blah, blah, blah.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to do those things. Yeah.
That we do that to this day with Run the Jewels. We're just like, what if we do this, right? Like you can't overthink it and you can't over industry it. And that's one thing that for me has been helpful. I work in the industry deeply, but I'm not of the industry. Mm-hmm. And I don't say that with any judgment. I say for myself and the way I think and operate and want to live my life. Like to be a creature of the industry for me could not work. It's not mine.
Yeah, which is fascinating because everybody that we've talked to for this seminar is not of the industry.
Right.
Yet they're some of the most of the industry people. Like, and I love that. You know, I think that's kind of like there's something there that the people who are truly successful and who make a career out of this and just devote their life to it don't necessarily always see themselves as being insiders. You know, they are coming from somewhere else and bringing a passion that was born from something completely different.
Yeah.
Whether it be film.
100%. I think the industry, if you're of, it can corrupt you or it can limit you or it can change. It can really put blinders on the way you think and the way you see the landscape.
Yeah.
And also as a manager, I have an advantage because management's other than the artists themselves, management is the only role where you have to know it. You're exposed to everything. Mm-hmm. Every single aspect of the business you have to deal with in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely, that's true.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it frees you from the shackles of that sort of confinement of I just do this or I just do that. Like I know what engineers and studios go through. I know what producers deal with. I know what tour managers deal with. I know what promoters deal with. I know what A&R guys and gals deal with. I know what everyone deals with. Right.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, you develop comprehensive learning, like knowledge of the industry and hopefully skill sets. What I developed, I had no idea that I was good at it, was being a business person. I never considered myself a business person. I was not a huge math guy. I was always in humanities, mm-hmm. reading and writing, arithmetic less so. But I learned, by doing it, by having to start businesses and, mm-hmm. and really just form and figure out how to run them, but also from being in businesses and having some not great experiences where, untoward things were happening in the finance room and, things that with people that I trusted because I'm not the business guy. I don't know what I'm doing. You guys handle that. I brought in the deals. I didn't count the money though. And that was my mistake. I say this all the time, and it's the only time you'll hear me quote Ronald Reagan, but it's trust, but verify.
Ah, very good advice.
I didn't verify.
Okay.
I didn't ask to look at the books. I didn't ask to see a statement every month. I didn't ask to be walked through what was happening, right? Mm-hmm. I was like, no, that's you guys, right? And both times, the till was being looted. By people that I
without going into too much detail, what part of the industry I think would that have been? So, if you're a young artist, what are some of those pitfalls to kind of watch out for, or make sure you have someone that knows how to verify? Coming up, like where are the things you should kind of watch for? Okay, this is where a lot of people might not be reading the fine print.
Well, they get scared if you're not a money or a math person. If you don't feel like you have a lot of exposure experience, be honest and be raw about it if you have to, and demand answers and demand it be explained to you until you get it. And if you can't get it, find someone you trust deeply who's really good at math. In fact, I advise everyone, my NYU students, everyone, learn. If you're good at math, you have an advantage.
Yeah.
If you're not good at math, get someone who is.
Okay.
In this business, right? And because it impacts every single thing we do, right?
Every dime, every penny.
Everything. How do you calculate royalties? Are they being calculated correctly? Mm-hmm. Doing budgets, budget projections, P&Ls, all of this stuff is incredibly important. And that taught me to be a business person and really to be a real entrepreneur now, like spreadsheets, I'm not afraid of them. Like, bring them on. Like, I can't put one together like a real finance person can, but I can engage with them and I can read them and I can understand. I know their value. They're really, really important to budget things and to understand how money works and money flows, cash flow.
And that's useful at any level, whether you're getting $100 for a gig or $10,000 for a gig. You need to know where every penny of that $100 or $10,000 is going, because $100 to a young 18-year-old artist is just as important as $10,000.
That's right.
To an older, more established artist.
Yep, and that's where the creative arts and artists need to really put more, and the framework, and those of us around them really need to develop better frameworks for them to understand this, because it's heartbreaking when you see all these stories, these nightmare stories about artists who didn't, who were either too naive or didn't understand what was happening, and and they end up broke. Put it this way: to be not emotional about it. When you realize that the machine is there for a reason, right? I'm not justifying or negating its existence. I'm just saying the machine, the beast, right? The big multinational corporation, say the music business, right? There are reasons. They're the only ones that can scale an artist like they can. You're not going to, they can make somebody a star, superstar, global superstar, right?
Absolutely.
They can do that. But they're no longer interested in developing anyone really to be that. So there's this huge piece of real estate that started opening up when I got into it, and we started understanding from an economics that you don't need to take over the whole world though to have a nice living. Like, you can make a decent amount of money.
Absolutely. Being
an independent artist. It's what are your ambitions and what are your aspirations? If your aspirations are to be a billionaire, like, no one talked about that when we were coming up. No artist talked about it. That was never even a possibility, right? It was about being great, making great music, like being the biggest rock band in the world or the best rap band in the world. I mean, that was people's aspirations, to do something really important, right? Yeah. And now you have artists who are, and it's not I think Bono was probably a billionaire before Jay-Z or anyone else, right? And Paul McCartney
and it's actually astonishing to see how much money those guys did not make back in the 60s.
Exactly.
And 70s.
Exactly.
It took them a long time to get the rules put in their favor to actually start earning. And that's why a lot of those guys are still working today.
That's right. And getting the right people around them who understood how the game worked at that level and could play it to their advantage and not get played on them. And
there was no game at that point. Like a lot of you find when you hear about the Beatles playing Candlestick Park on PA systems that were built for baseball, like they were writing a book,
absolutely.
So a lot of what we're seeing now is just trial and error by groups and acts and managers for the last 50 years, 60 years, really trying to figure out how to make this industry work. And some people want to make it work for The Office, and some people want to make it work for the guy with the guitar,
and there's an important time in the last 50 years, right? Yeah. Where a lot of it changed was the 80s, when you saw the sort of conglomeration of companies and these multinationals being born, and Wall Street really taking off. So something like Atlantic Records, one of the great record labels, was an independent for decades. And when they all got rolled up and then started having to report to Wall Street every quarter, it changed a lot of how the music industry works and what motivates people, right? And then you saw more people coming in from the corporate side. And again, I'm not judging anyone. They're coming in, they're trained, they have different skill sets, they're there to make money, et cetera, et cetera. They don't even understand what the other brain is doing, other side of the brain, right? And it was kept that way, right? And artists were really, really pushed down the totem pole of importance in many ways. Like, they're just fodder for these CDs, right? Yep. So they could sell plastic discs where they were making all their money, and the artists became secondary. And then you saw competition between those on the corporate side and the artists, almost like this resentment. Like, they wanted to make the money on the corporate side. They wanted to be the big shots and the important ones, right? So now you have executives making 100 million plus a year at the very top. right? So that all went in line with the rise of Wall Street and corporate America, though,
okay.
right? It's all, you can't really separate them
okay.
at the end of the day, just like you can't separate tech and music, or what happened to the music business.
I want to go there. I think that would be a great, because there's still so much that you've done post Definitive Jux. I want to talk about Run the Jewels, how you guys set that up. But now that we're kind of in this industry tier right now, how do you see things changing with all of this technology? I want to talk about NFT. I want to talk about, just royalties, rights of music.
Right.
What are your takes on all of that we just talked about? The things to look out for, the things that aren't that are out of your hands, the things that people rip you off on, and what do you see about the future of music with all this technology, blockchain, digital currencies? Do you see maybe like some sort of, I don't want to say utopia, but it seems like there's more power being funneled back into artistry and independence. That a lot of so what do you see? Yeah, what how are you taking all this in?
I think, and I'm trying to be incredibly sober about how I look at the space. I've been down the rabbit hole now for a solid year and a half.
Yeah,
just learning as much as I can and not sort of falling for the fool's gold.
Totally,
that's out there, because there's always much more that lies beneath of what's all the chatter, right? Mm-hmm. And I do think it has the potential to be absolutely revolutionary, right? Just like the internet was, though, and that's the lesson we have to learn, though, because we heard a lot of the same stuff back then. I know the students weren't around to hear all of that hype and how the internet is it's just going to be Shangri-La, right? It's going to be this whole new age and this whole new day, and it's going to be great for everyone. And you're going to have all this ability to do this, and Google, do no evil, all of that hype, right? And we thought fucking magic was happening, like it was magic, and it wasn't magic. It was a small group of, really a small, tiny percentage of people writing all of this, programming and coding, coming up with this. And it was revolutionary. But look what Spotify streams pay out.
Yeah.
That's not very fucking revolutionary to me, or if you're an artist and you see how you're being compensated, and you see, I remember, I'll never forget seeing it on social, this is several years ago, but the CTO of a major music tech company posting about his third home he just bought. Right, and not even one of the major ones. One of the not a Spotify or an Apple, something not even on that level. Yeah. And I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah,
this is crazy. We have artists who can't feed their families, and you have these folks buying a third house, and he's, it's like, I don't want to begrudge anybody any of their hustle. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to knock anyone's hustle, really, but it's unfair. And now there's an opportunity to democratize it a bit, I think. But key to that is education about what it all is, what it all means. Mm-hmm. They've got us all salivating over NFTs and crypto, which are blockchain products. So if you don't understand blockchain, you don't really understand crypto or NFTs.
Totally. And I would I'd interject. I did meet with a group of guys that were starting an online Ethereum, which is a cryptocurrency based music platform.
Sure.
It was called Ujo Music. And I met with them, talked on the phone, talked about doing a project maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. So pre-NFT, pre-non-fungible token. And they told me a great story that I think you'd love. They met with all the majors first. Before they launched Ujo, they said, well, we've created this platform and this system that I think majors would absolutely love. It's traceable blockchain data on music files that basically every song you sell can have royalty rates, it can have splits, it can have who played what on the record, everything built in, who wrote what part of any song, all built in through the blockchain, through this system of data attached to the actual thing, unfallible. You can't fudge it. You can't change it. You can't crack it. You can't change somebody's percentage. It's there. It's locked in. They took it to all. They met with everybody. They met with 5 majors. They went, had meetings. Every major as they closed the door on their way out, said, no, thank you. We don't want transparency. Like,
that's it.
We're not interested in that. And they were honest. They were like, that's not for us. And so they didn't get that. So they said, okay, we'll start our own. And this is, as one of our other guests had said, Yusuf Ali of Blast Radio, he said, there's nothing worse in tech than being too early. And I think, and I think Ujo was a bit too early, because now we see basically everything's happening that they were talking about. And I think that is what you're talking about. That's the stuff that works. And this system of honesty and transparency that can just get everybody paid what they need to be paid without any questions. I think that future is idyllic, and that's fast. That's
and it's a must, because music is a low margin business. There isn't enough money to go around for all the, you know what I mean? We've got to eliminate some of the dead weight, or cut the fat, or whatever term you want to use, if the artists want to have more, because everything comes at the expense of to the artist, right? The artist
is the one actually creating the cultural capital that we're selling.
That's right. And who has the consumer base, right? Has the audience. And I think this is what blockchain speaks to. And I think the new age we're entering is the power of community and audience. Yes. And if you're an artist, or if you're a creator, or if you're anyone and you have an audience, I mean, look at social media influencers, look at TikTok. I know a young man who just recent college grad got $30 million in financing because he had a substantial social media following, and he had a business plan, right? And what he wanted to do, right? Because that's audience. You can monetize that. I know that with Run the Jewels, they have a really diehard audience. Yeah. And if you have a community like that, you don't have to worry about, I mean, sure, getting Spotify streams and this and all the sort of ecosystem income you can get your hands on is great. But if you can sell directly to your audience and keep the lion's share, they're much happier giving the money directly to Killer Mike and LP than thinking all these other people in between are stepping on it. Totally. If you have enough of the audience, I mean, we did a couple of million in pre-sales from our website for the last album.
Wow.
A couple $1 million, not units, but a couple $1 million. Yeah. So for an independent act, sure, they have a certain status and profile, but we do everything ourselves pretty much.
Let's break that down, because I think that's really important too. You guys are a great example of, nowadays you tell the students, you're your best social media director, you're your best. This is pre-management, pre-label, pre-full album even. When you're just getting started, you know yourself better than anyone else. And
that's right.
Your responsibility to either come up with the theme, the plot that you're going to share with the world, or you need to hire people that or work with people that are really good at, making memes, or making clickable like graphics that are really, you really in this day and age have to do so much as a young
You've got to have a narrative, visual and otherwise, not just musical, right? Yes. And you can't make assumptions that everyone is just going to care so much about what I'm doing, and what I'm doing is still
100%.
Young artists tend to do that. I don't blame them. I get it. It's very serious.
So what do you guys do? Like what are all of these facets that you're thinking about as working with Run the Jewels, to get to the point that you can actually move that much stuff before the album comes out? I think that's a great example of doing it right, because you're working well enough with all the other stuff that's happening to just kind of show the fans that what we're about to put out is going to be worth your time and your money. And that's why you have commitment. And it's not a single, it's not just a song that came out that, hey, this is really good. You guys, Mad Mike's been in a lot of places, he's being seen multiple places. You guys you're hitting on so many different angles. And I think that's a really cool thing if we could break that down and just hear about what that takes and who's doing that, who's working on that. Sure. What do you guys do? Like what are the emails? Like how does this stuff happen?
Oh my God. You don't want to know that.
I mean, like what are all the spider web angles of like, how do you make
I'll tell you what, if and I'm not trying to oversimplify this, but in a way it kind of needs to be kept simple because, and I don't want to sound corny, either, but that just them. They're really great. Hey, they're the bug, not the feature, right? Like this is an anomaly, what they've achieved in the music business. It doesn't happen very often. But it emanated from two artists, two friends who completely threw fear out the window when they decided to do this, and also decided to give the music away for free, which I'm like, well, how are we supposed to make money? And their response was basically, if the kids like it, they'll pay us back somehow. And this is coming from two veterans. This is not two wild-eyed, kids in from the woods, right? With the who don't understand.
And what year was that being said? I think is important.
That was 2013.
That was a long time ago.
Probably.
In technology standards,
It was, yeah. But they've done their thing independently and had individual success. But it was like they were at a crossroads, as artists, and they're like, they didn't want to do the traditional thing and run around and beg for a major label deal. They're like, fuck it. They connected musically. They had something they were excited about. And that really is the wellspring of everything with Run the Jewels. It's that spirit of let's do something really cool. And if people like it, they'll pay us for it somehow. We don't know how yet, right? And then that allowed us to build and stay kids in that way, fans. Like, how fun is this? We get to do this, right? Because there's no one telling us what to do. We can do whatever the fuck we want, whatever artwork we want, whatever this we want, whatever that we want. But had been around and had enough knowledge to know that it's just not a lark. Like there could be something here, right? Let's not overthink it.
Yeah.
Let's not kill it with like all the business stuff yet, right? Let's let it grow into something and be real, and let's just pour water on it. Like, let's cultivate this thing and see what happens to it. And again, I love to take credit for a lot of this shit, man, but we just stumbled into. I mean, Jamie and Mike are the reason. I mean, the vision they had and the world that they started building, from the logo just to the songs, to the names and songs, to everything, the pictures they were painting were resonant for enough people that it gave us the spark to work with, right? And we just started igniting other stuff. But when the music connects with the ecosystem, not just with those lean years in the indie world or the underground years where you're just focused on making the illest, dopest, rawest shit you can make, right? As an artist, right? And maybe you see a little success, make a little money, but your impact in culture, even in a small way, right? If you're lucky enough to still have a career, because most of the artists have to give it up at some point, unfortunately, because they just can't survive financially. You run into people like we do all the time to this day in really interesting positions in our industry and beyond. Who, I mean, we were at for a good example, a few years ago, we were doing Jimmy Kimmel, and some guy in a suit, corporate looking guy, walks up to LP and he's like, "Hey, LP, what are you doing tomorrow night?" And he's like, "I don't know. What am I doing tomorrow night?" He's like, "You're going to the Star Wars world premiere," and he hands him 2 tickets, right? To the red carpet, the big deal with and he's like, "I grew up on your music." He's like Def Jux and all that was such a huge influence on me. And now he's a Disney executive, right? Wow. He's like, "This is my small way of paying you back for all the great music." So that happens all the time with him and Mike.
Yeah.
It's amazing, right? And that's something you cannot plan for.
Yeah.
That's not something you cannot manufacture. I mean, Alfonso Cuarón, one of the great living film directors, he did Roma and all these great films. The RTJ is one of his favorite groups, we find out. And fast forward, now we're actually we're working on something together, and that's because he loves them.
Yeah.
Right? He looks at them, and they're probably around the same age. So you think maybe coming up, this is a group that he grew up with, or artists because he knows them before Run the Jewels, especially LP. He was a fan of, so
there's an openness there too. I think that both of those artists, they offer, and I think that's what people are feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
These offers don't come to everybody that's been doing it this long. So I think that's a testament to their character and how well they presented themselves in this industry.
Yeah, and they represent something that's really unique to people. They're two older guys who blew up later in their career, which never happens.
True.
It's one black guy, one white guy, one from New York, one from the South. You know what I mean? They shouldn't be buddies. They shouldn't be able to make great music like this. They should. They're both brilliant, two of the smartest people I've ever met. Right? So they're profound thinkers as well as ill MCs and producers and all of that. And they appeal. Their friend network and just their affinity group is so diverse and crazy. Like, it's amazing the amount of people who are touched by them.
It's true.
And that, to me, I feel like, wow, we're so lucky, like, just to be a part of something like this. But it emanates, everything we do emanates from them, who they are. If we do a brand deal, it's because they fuck with it. You know, that means something to them. It's important. They like it, or it's not just for the money. You know,
I think a tangible nugget I'm hearing here is trueness to self. And that, I'm not saying you have to, if you're kind of like an introvert and you're into really weird stuff, just do that, you know, but do it honestly and stick to your guns, you know, like stay with it, you know, do what you want to do long enough, be a good person. I think that's what a lot of these people are feeling. They're resonating. You're feeling it, you know, the more positivity that I hear about, you know, from lifelong legends, you know, the people that do it forever, you rarely hear that they're a-holes or, you know, that they just totally abuse everybody that works for them, and they don't
that it's simply transactional.
Yeah, right? It's more heart.
It's not.
The heart is the heart is the addictive part. That you want to work with people that spew love and spew devotion to craft, and give a fuck about other people. Yes,
you know what I mean. Like, that's important. Like, you actually care, and my guys care. We all care about. I mean, it's important to us too. And they try and manifest it in tangible ways. Whether it's, I mean, they've raised so much money for charity. I mean, whether it's donations when they drop their album, you know, if you can download it for free, but they ask that if you want to, you make a donation to a whole, you know, all these charities that you can pick from, right? But it's like, talk to people like they're smart. LP says that all the time about their fans.
I like that.
We talk to them like they're smart, like, because we assume that they have brains, right? And they don't need to be talked to like they're freaking idiots, like most people are.
Yeah,
you know, and be authentic to you. It also doesn't mean you don't want to or can't make a lot of money. I mean, they've done incredibly well for themselves and adhere to these core principles. You know, they haven't had to abdicate that or disavow or be hypocritical, because they love money too, right? But they also love people, and they love art, and they love community, and they love those sort of things just as much, if not more, right? The money's great. But the money without those other things is a little empty, especially in a business like ours and these careers where it is community. You're on the road with a whole bunch of people. You're in the studio with people. You're constantly working with people. If you're the only one really eating and everyone else is sort of just hanging on, that's not good karma, man. That's not good juju and good vibes. Like,
I've been on tours with I've supported many acts along the way, and some of the biggest acts I did Depeche Mode support in Europe, you know, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, and just seeing how well oiled and functional the machine was at that point, from tour manager to stage manager to chef and the guy that's cooking all their meals to the performers, you know, Martin Gore, like being there in the cafeteria, eating with the truck driver, and, you know, just talking, and you seeing this camaraderie and this just respect that I think you're talking about, that going both ways, that is so important to keep. And if you're a young artist and you're working with one person or a band, or you're on tour, you know, with a few people, that level of respect works at that level or at the top level. And I think people want to help you get further, and they want you to succeed. I think that's kind of the most important thing that I've seen is everybody wants everybody to succeed, mostly, unless there's some, a nihilistic, villainous thing going on. But for the most part, everybody just wants everyone else to kind of help each other get up a little further.
That's right.
Don't get in the way of that.
And the examples that are set are very powerful. So it's like life and anything. If what is shown, the path towards success is doing negative things, you're being cutthroat or being selfish, if that's shown to give you the reward, that's what people will do.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. They'll emulate that. But if other things are highlighted as being important and being valuable, a good example is when Run the Jewels played Madison Square Garden a few years back with Jack White. It was such an incredible experience. First of all, Jack was such a fan and wanted them
that's amazing.
To open. But they hung out with them afterwards, and what they said that really was so impressive. I think they went out for dinner.
Okay.
He's so kind and such a gentleman, so nice to the wait staff, and just so respectful and considerate of everyone. And that stuck out to them more than anything. They never met him, and maybe he's a big rock star attitude, but he's such a decent human being, right?
Yeah.
And we see that a lot with people. You're like, wow, they are just they're a celebrity or a famous artist or somebody, and you expect them to have all kinds of arrogance or issues.
Lou Reed was the exception, and he was allowed to. I think everyone allows Lou to have his Lou stories. You hear something, but everybody else,
which is
cool.
but Laurie Anderson, his partner, right?
Yeah.
Who was like, I remember at Michigan when I was at U of M and home when the Brave came out. I went to see that probably like 3 times.
Okay.
I think it was at the State Theater before that was even an Urban Outfitters or whatever.
Now it's a Target, to be honest with you.
Right, a Target, right?
I know, but they did redo the State, so the State's still there.
That movie blew me away. But so Ruth Daniel, who you brought up earlier, which is
a guest as well.
This.
Absolutely.
And I'm on the board of her organization in Place of War.
Yes.
And last year there was an event at Laurie Anderson's studio.
Okay.
So in Manhattan, and there's all this, of course, her and Lou shared that studio space for years, and just the nerd out fanboy story. I'm wandering around. I go down to the basement. I think I'm looking for the men's room. I don't know what I'm doing, and there's a step and repeat down there, like when you get the photos taken and all of that stuff. And I'm wandering around, and I see this amazing, like, train set, crazy thing, art project. Something's being built here. And I'm standing there, like, staring at it. And who walks up behind? And I'm talking to one of Laurie's assistants, right, about it. And who walks up? And it's like, hey, you want me to show you? Right? It's Laurie Anderson. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, and we sit there for like a half an hour, and she's walking me through her next installation and playing with it and done it. I'm like, man, this is crazy. Like, for me, and I know most of the students probably don't even know who I'm talking about, but maybe they do, no offense. But for someone who, to me, was such an important artist, like, not musician, visual artist, performance artist, that I was doing something so new and cool. Then to fast forward to first come upon her at school, and then 30 years later be hanging out at her studio with her while she's walking me through the installations, like as a fan. Those are the moments I live for. Those are the moments that help me wake up every day saying, I love what I do. I love this job. Let's go do something fun, important, interesting, creative, exciting.
Absolutely. We have covered so much. I mean, is there anything you really want to cover that maybe we didn't cover in terms of, what just messages for the young people? Or, I mean,
well, certainly, I think as we were touching on blockchain and Web3 and the NFT space, I think everyone really needs to wrap their head around that aggressively and understand it. Because if you could democratize and demystify this new wave of technology, it's going to benefit a lot of people.
So pay attention.
And more than a few people. And it's also super fun and interesting where it's going, and the things that you can do creatively with this technology is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I think I tell people we're in the Wild West right now.
We totally are.
This is 1.0 version.
I think it's really important for artists especially artists in the West, to recognize one thing for artists in the West to recognize, and that is the global music business is exploding, right? And the West, America, UK, Europe is becoming much less important to the overall global music scene because they're huge artists. I mean, BTS is probably the biggest group in the world right now.
Yeah.
They're artists from all over the place.
You're working in Africa as well, and a lot of African artists are
yeah.
And they're showing up all over the top US charts.
That's right. And look at Latin America. Puerto Rico alone is probably responsible for such an insane, disproportionate amount of success relative to its population size. I think 8 of the top 10 YouTube songs, or 7 out of the top 10 are Puerto Rican artists. You know what I mean? It's insane, right? So in China, Asia's coming on strong. Africa's the next massive market. So I think the days of Western acts dominating the world stage is pretty much over. They'll be there. You know, you'll have your Drakes, you'll have your Taylor Swifts, you'll have every once in a while, but you're going to see more BTSs. You're going to see more artists from other parts of the world. And I think that's important for everyone to recognize. And that's not necessarily a negative, right? It just, it could birth more opportunities for everybody. It's
Absolutely.
Just understanding the playing field. The other thing is AI. We talked about blockchain, but machine learning and AI are the other 2 pillars of the future of technology. And they are coming into the music space.
How do you see that?
Artists have to be ready for this because it's going to impact dramatically. And how I see it, I could be wrong, but how I see it, and this is based on my own observations and knowledge and research, but also talking to stakeholders in this, like the head of one of the major publishing companies, for example, who I was talking to. And because I'd heard some AI music and it was pretty good. It was actually shockingly good.
Wow.
It wasn't great, but just in terms of it's like, whoa, this is a machine did this. Whoa, this is scary.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'm like, what do you think? 7 years, 10 years? And he's like, hell no, 5 years. You know, and some of these guys and gals are frothing at the mouth at this because if they don't have to pay royalties, if they don't have to sign contracts, if they don't have to do any of that or worry about any of that, and they can just crank out hits, right, that these algorithms are making, that's going to totally disrupt the industry, and it will happen. But the flip side to that is that machines can't. They can do a lot, and yes, they can learn drum patterns, they can learn things, they can learn, and they can da-da-da-da. But what they can never learn are things like love, faith, inspiration, hope, loss, sad, like those emotional things that Jack Ma of Alibaba would call the soft values. Right?
Oh, yeah. I like that.
Which he stresses to young people to really, a machine can't be compassionate. A human can, though, right? And that's one of our saving graces. So if you want to be an engineer or you want to do something super technical, he was saying, good luck competing with the machines because they're already smarter than us, right? But they can never do these human things, these true, deep human values. And it's like, tell your children to embrace them in life because that's what will power them through the future in this oncoming battle, right? with machines.
So watch out.
So,
there's
but good art,
computer
good
coming
art,
to take your drums,
right? But the point is, good art will always have a place.
100%.
Artists who are truly creating something special and unique and personal and individual will always have a place. You see massive acquisitions happening amongst catalog right now. Billions and billions and billions of dollars are at play acquiring music catalog. Part of that is music like that will never get made again. Ever, right? Because machines are going to be making so much more of the music in the future. That the value of existing catalogs is only going to go up, right? So it's a really interesting time to getting into the space. I just want to make sure that creatives benefit as much as anyone in the success of whatever the new music industry is going to be. And a lot of that's going to be driven by young people having the courage.
Always is.
Right?
Yeah.
And the talent and not afraid of the work. The one thing I will say that I don't see as much of these days, and that's probably because their attention is being demanded in so many different places, like social media, is the work in the studio and the work on the craft is going to distinguish. That's really going to separate people at the end of the day, young artists, the ones who are trying to do great things, because you can't skimp on the work, right?
If you see all these personalities, you know, that whether it be TikTok, YouTube, music or not, you know, a lot of them, when they get started, they're editing 23 hours a day. They're scripting. They're thinking of these ideas that are going to generate clicks and views. And that's work, you know, like a lot of it's personality.
Absolutely.
And it's, you watch video 1 to video 10,000, you know, of the really big personality. A lot has grown and changed.
Absolutely.
But they started at 1 doing the work. And, you know, they don't just become overnight sensations right away. So
I'll tell you a story about Jay. No, absolutely. last anecdote, and this is Jay-Z anecdote. Like Jay, he came up at the same time a lot of us were coming up in New York in the rap scene. He was a different, he was part of a group. Like we knew who he was, right? But no one really expected to see what happened. But what he did do when he started Rockefeller was get in a van and go up and down the East Coast, play every show, shake every hand, go to every record store, every radio station. He put in the work, him and Dame Dad. They put in the work. That ended up paying off, you know, years later. And if you don't do that, if you don't lay down the foundation, I mean, Bob Dylan went on tour with Blues Masters before he ever showed up in Greenwich Village, right? Learning the craft
with his fake voice, his fake accent,
right,
and his new name, Mr. Minnesota, Bob Zimmerman,
right. Yeah. But he learned showbiz.
I love the Bob Dylan story. So
he learned showbiz. But the work is critical, and I stress that to everyone, and that will pay you back. You know, sure, with money. It'll pay you back with money, but it'll pay you back with so much more.
You just feel like you're getting paid for what you did, you know?
Yeah.
And flukes are flukes, and it's fine if you do get a fluke that turns into 1 million streams all of a sudden.
Sure.
So embrace it, you know, but don't feel bad. But do the work.
That's right.
Back it up, you know, like let people know that you mean business. I think Lil Nas X is a great example of somebody who
absolutely is,
who had this kind of freak occurrence with a SoundCloud style release that just blew up, but now he's doing it. He put so much work into his album. He's really being honest and coming out and like with just everything he wants to say.
That's right.
Just not being afraid, you know, doing what he wants to do on SNL. Like that's a great example of, you know, okay, I got the torch. Now I'm going to run with it and show everybody I need this torch, you know, and I earned this torch.
It's agency, man. It's agency. It's not hiring an ad agency. It's having your own agency,
100%.
like literally.
100%. I think I would love to say something I've said before that kind of I wanted to say as you were talking about a lot of this stuff. I said in the past, I think I tweeted it, music will save the music industry.
Right.
And I think it's
well said.
True. Whether it's NFT, whether it's artists like Lil Nas X, it's always going to be about, first and foremost, the music. You know, you can be,
and if we can,
millions of dollars put behind you, but if you don't have the thing that people hear that resonates, and I wanted to say it's about AI, basically. Like, you know, AI can come up with a lot. Hopefully, there's always going to be that little bit of the soft stuff, the soft currency, the soft emotions.
That's right.
That really are the thing that sells it. And stay true to that.
You have to, and you have to be able to live without the fear of all the bad things that are going to happen if you don't do this. So you have to embrace it and jump in and be smart and take, you know.
Totally. But know when you have to do it. Know when you have to do a side job, and know when it's okay to go deliver pizzas for 5 years. You know, and
but not be afraid or ashamed of, because when you meet all these. You meet all these successful people in the business, then you hear about what they did and what they went through and what the hustles they had to do, and you're like, whoa, that's so amazing. It adds to the whole narrative and the whole character and flavor of what makes this industry, though. Yeah. There are fascinating people in this industry who have gone through so much interesting shit to get where they are and had to put so much on the line to get what they are. if you're lucky enough to be around people like that, the good ones, right? Treasure those relationships and the advice you get from these people. And you can learn so much just from a story that somebody tells, right?
I think you have given us some great advice and great stories. And I just want to thank you. I think you have been that person for everyone that's been able to see this.
Well,
and you've really given us a lot of inside history on how you got to where you are now. We could talk for 2 more hours. I know.
Yeah, man.
When you come back in the spring to talk more in the roundtable discussion online with people, I think we're going to get a lot more out of you.
Right on.
And more hands-on. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to the next round.